Welcome everybody. This is the meeting of the Macclesfield Town Council Planning Committee, and this is the agenda for the 6th of November 2020 at 10 AM. My name is Mike Hutchison and I'm the chair of the planning. We don't have any apologies for absence for the meeting, so it's declarations of interest. Councillor Edwards. It's to unmute yourself, Councillor.
Do beg your pardon. Good morning, Chair. I wish to declare a non-pecuniary interest in the King's School application on the grounds that I am a governor of King's School. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to declare interest in the same application, a non-pecuniary interest on the grounds of being a local business owner.
Thank you. Anybody else? Declarations of interest? No? Now I'm going to hand over to the town clerk, who is going to introduce our public speakers.
Okay, so I'm going to read out a statement we've had. It's anonymous, and this is the first. We strongly object on the following grounds. Just a caveat, this is the Moss Lane development 20/4065M. So they strongly object to it on the following grounds: invasion of our privacy, unstable land which is subject to flooding, natural haven for wildlife, increased volume of traffic on Moss Lane which is already a bottleneck, increased noise. We are already subject to the terrible clattering and banging from Henshaws. Increased fumes. Again, we are already subjected to terrible smells from Henshaws. We fully support the objections and will further support them financially if deemed necessary to take this matter further. Admin and Governance Manager, would you like to read the next statement out, please?
Yes, this statement is regarding the Moss Lane development 20/4065M, and it's from a Mr. Lee Wadsworth. I'm writing on behalf of my household about the planning application. The application is of great concern to us. I shall address our points individually. Increase in traffic. We use Moss Lane to get to our place of work. The traffic is already extremely congested and it can take an age just to get out of Buckingham Rise itself. We already have enough increased traffic from Henshaws and the new property development. This proposed development with the new inhabitants will increase traffic enormously. It is such a lot of people living in a small space with all the extra cars they'll be using. All this extra traffic will reduce air quality and increase pollution. Habitat. Many of us on Whitfield Drive have purchased our properties in recent times. I am sure it would have affected mine and their decisions to buy property with proposed developments going on. Part of the beauty of living here is the tranquility and green space it provides, access to the footpath and green space to walk our dogs, etc. This development will limit this experience and affect beautiful habitat we have grown to love. Wildlife. I'm also fully aware that this land is known to be marshland and is prone to flooding. I worry for neighbours at the bottom of Whitfield Drive whose properties would be vulnerable to subsidence. It really is not suitable for building development and is home to diverse wildlife and wildlife habitat. Who would take responsibility for this? I am sure a building company would really not consider the effect it would have on our local wildlife and residents. Privacy. Is it really fair to grant planning permission when residents in the locale will have their properties overlooked by a 3-storey development? I feel for them with regard to their privacy and the effect of overpopulating such a small area in terms of noise and the potential of extra refuse. Also, it's really not in keeping with the surrounding developments. Whitfield Drive and Buckingham Rise are large, spacious residential properties, which is part of their appeal for families. Also, we have many elderly people living in this area. We have all invested time and money in our properties and have developed a strong community bond. Property value. I'm sure such a development will reduce the value of our properties and make it a less desirable place to live, which does not seem fair as many of us have paid 300 to 450,000 for properties in this area. Infrastructure. There is simply no infrastructure to support more cars, more people. There are no shops nearby, no public transport. It just seems a development better suited to somewhere near the town centre, where there is more amenity to support such a dense population increase. Pollution. This proposed development would cause significant amounts of building dust, which has the potential to affect the local population who suffer from asthma and chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. I note that older people live near this site, and I'm sure some of them do suffer with such conditions, as well as the younger populations, of course. Have the developers considered this? Are they going to compensate people whose general health is affected by such pollutants in the air? Brick dust is a significant cause of silicosis, and having these particles and other building dusts in the nearby would cause exacerbations of the local residents' pre-existing respiratory conditions. Strongly object to this planning application and hope the council can see that we have very valid reasons for this objection. I hope you can see these twos and please reject this development. It really is the wrong development for such an area which should be protected in the way Danes Moss is protected. It is simply not vacant land. Please protect it.
Okay, thank you, Harriet. So now the first speaker will be Councillor Laura Judah.
Oh, hi, good morning. I want to object to the application you've just been discussing, 20/4065M, development on Moss Lane. I've got three areas that I want to object to, but they equally is important, I think. I'm going to start off with the design of the building. I think a 3-storey building with a flat roof, 36 apartments and parking space for 40 cars is completely out of keeping with this area. It's a relatively small place for such a large development, and I think the design is out of keeping with that. The other area that I want to object to is, although this seems to be put forward as affordable housing, there is very little detail, in fact no detail at all, about how many of these properties will be affordable. Will they be to rent? Will they be to buy? Although they talk about, I think, part ownership in this, there is no detail. What we need is affordable housing in Macclesfield. We need it to be well planned and attractive. We don't want unattractive buildings in the wrong place, basically. I would want to know more about the affordable housing to rent. Will that be given over to a housing provider? There is nothing, a social housing provider, there is nothing in the application to suggest that. And then thirdly, I think the traffic, which is already being discussed, the amount of traffic on Moss Lane is really unacceptable. We cannot go on like this. We've got huge, we've got a demolition firm, we've got haulage contractor, we've got masses of HGVs travelling up and down Moss Lane every day, sometimes starting very early in the morning and going on till late. Okay, Laura, I've got you. But I also want to remind people that this is an area where there's a large amount of respiratory conditions of people who live, particularly on the other side of the road on the Moss Estate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Judah. Next to speak on the same Planning 20/4065M, I have Sarah Bracegirdle.
Hi, good morning, everybody. We live on Whitfield Drive, directly facing the proposed development in this land, and we've already objected. Sorry, I can't hear very well. There's some echo. We've already objected and copied yourself in on our objection. Firstly, the look and scale of the development is a large, dominant, dark 3-storey block of flats.
Interrupting, Sarah. Please, can everybody who's not on mute go on mute, because that's why Sarah's having some difficulty. Town Clerk, can you please give Sarah some more time? I apologise for the interruption, but I can't hear you. I'm sorry.
Sorry.
No, it's not your fault. We all need to mute, please, and then. Okay.
Is that any better? Good, excellent. Yeah, we, as I was saying, we live directly opposite the land, and our first objection is really the look and scale of the development. It's a large, dominant 3-storey block of flats with a flat roof, and it's just not in keeping with any of the local home, the local area or the homes in the surrounding area. The majority of the homes are either single or 2-storey pitched roof houses. There are a small number of flats in the area, but they've been built to completely blend in with the surrounding homes, so they look, again, 2-storey pitched roof construction. Secondly, the height and number of stories of the development is a concern for us. We would be directly overlooked by this development, and we've estimated that around 37 homes surrounding would have their privacy compromised, with many of the flats having direct views into some of the homes, including ours. I believe this would be a direct invasion of our privacy into all of the principal rooms of our home, including our young daughter's bedroom, from the south side of the development. I know that in 2018 there was a planning application at 162 Moss Lane for some semi-detached houses, and I think the original proposal was 3-storey, and that had to be revised to keep in with the local area and character of the other surrounding properties. I think also somebody has also mentioned that the land is very wet and marshy. Our development had to be built up on raised land because of this. The plans don't appear to take that into consideration, and they already show that the height of the proposed block is higher than some of the neighbouring homes. We're concerned that a building of this scale would have to be built up even further to support it. I don't know, I'm not a building expert, but obviously with the land being marshy. We're also worried about potential subsidence to our shared driveway, garage and home. With any disturbance to that land, there's already a little bit of fall away on the drive. We also concerned about the level of traffic and an additional access point on Moss Lane. The road is already too busy in the mornings, especially. We have to cut through the Moss Estate, which is obviously not ideal and we don't want to have to do, but sometimes just to get into town and to get to work, we have to do that. Ecological factors. We're advised that the land provides habitat for several breeds of protected birds and bats. There's also a large sycamore tree on the land that we have been in contact with the Woodland Trust about whether that is a veteran tree or not. That's it from me. Thank you.
Sarah, that's the 3 minutes up.
Sorry.
Thank you very much. Okay, so now I have Laura Ellsgood. If you can unmute yourself, Laura, or I can.
Sorry, yeah. So I'm here to object to the planning application 204065M. I know that the application site forms part of the South Macclesfield development area that was granted planning permission in January 2019. I'm aware that the site does form part of the allocation, but this provides no detail on where houses, play space or green space should be. More than £100,000 was then spent on a planning application, and this provides much more detail on the site and supersedes the allocation. As part of the granted planning permission, the site current planning application is specifically identified as an area of green infrastructure landscaping that provides a public cycle identified for the local area of play. This green infrastructure, or landscape area in identified land use framework plan and cited in the planning application decision notice. Condition 4 of the planning permission stipulates development should be carried out in complete accordance with the land use framework plan. The outlined planning permission for South Macclesfield development area is a key material consideration for this planning application at Moss Lane. I strongly object to the application that is before the council because it clearly is contrary to the conditions and plans approval part overarching outline plan for South Macclesfield. Approving the planning application would fly in the face of good planning and all principles set out in the outline planning permission. If the council is to support this application, it is effectively turning its back on all the detailed technical information that is in the planning permission. This cannot be right. Additionally, the application for Moss Lane is supported by insufficient information. Specifically, there's no ecology assessment, geo-environmental assessment, landscape scheme, transport assessment, tree survey, it should not be validated and should not be determined until information is provided and made available for public consideration. In summary, I respectfully request that the council objects to this application and also puts on the record the number of glaring gaps in technical details of this submission. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Next, I have Chris Bateson. You'd like to unmute yourself, Chris?
Yeah,
Thank you.
okay. Good morning, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak. Firstly, can I just say how appalled and upset I was to find out about this development via a Macclesfield Facebook group, rather than any form of consultation from Cheshire East Council. As a neighbour of over 7 years living only 3 doors away, I find this most unacceptable. I'm going to recap on some of the points, but I would like to raise awareness to how much congestion there already is on Moss Lane. Certainly at peak times and school drop-off or pick-up times, most days traffic can be already backed up to the proposed development site, all the way from Congleton Road. I can only see this getting worse with the ongoing building works at the Henshaw site, with already hundreds of houses planned and being built. Not to mention the ongoing problems with heavy goods vehicles and literally what impact they are having on the road. We have already had numerous repairs to the road surface and the amenities below. Moss Lane isn't on a bus route, as the developers have suggested, and with the current plans, I feel they haven't accounted for what could be in the region of 50+ cars with visitors and residents. There are no plans, however, to relieve the road situation at either end of Moss Lane to reduce congestion. At peak times, the air quality is certainly impacted in an already heavily populated community. Water pressure is already becoming an ongoing issue with the extra demand alone from the new housing on the Henshaw site. This proposed development will further impact that. Furthermore, the design of the new building isn't in keeping with the area at all. The flat roof, the office block, brickwork and big glass panels will be better suited to the town centre, not a residential area with mainly 3, 4 or 5 bedroom housing. Plus the fact it's 3-storey, which will overlook many houses in the area. Again, the land is very marshy and a natural habitat for wildlife, including many bats and owls. I'm also concerned with extra building work. We will have more problems with flooding on Moss Lane. It's already happening after the new development further down Moss Lane, just off Moss Chase. We are currently running out of green space in the South Macclesfield area, with every bit of green space being sold off for housing. The councillors said in their last meeting that Macclesfield is desperate for social housing. What about the infrastructure in this area? What about schools? Where will all these extra children go with the 2 local schools to Moss Lane already at full capacity? What about hospitals with departments closing left, right and centre? Again, I thank you for your time and I hope you give this a lot more careful consideration. I strongly object to this development and think it would have a detrimental effect on the area. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. We now have Joyce Ward. So I'll just, can you unmute Joyce?
Hello.
Okay.
Am I there?
Yeah.
Good morning. I reside with my family directly opposite the proposed development site. Whilst we are not totally against the building of homes, as we have already had numerous erected around us, we strongly oppose these plans because the building would negatively impact our daily lives by invading the privacy of ourselves and all the adjacent properties to the site, due to the height and the amount of windows that are being proposed to look straight towards our properties. The proposed landscaping for the site does not seem adequate, as it would only obscure the view for a limited time of the year once the trees had grown substantially. The design of the building is totally out of keeping with the area There are no other buildings along the road with this design, and I would urge the developers to have a rethink and look at all the new houses being constructed nearby that are in keeping with our area and are not likely to depreciate the value of all neighbouring properties. The allocated 40 car parking spaces may not be adequate, and if not, where would residents park? On an already busy main road, or to add to the neighbours' misery outside their homes? If this happens, how would emergency services be able to access those in need? The existing water and waste amenities are already struggling to cope with current demands. So many neighbours are worried that they will not be able to cope. The existing plot, thank you, the existing plot has long been a haven for many species of wildlife, including foxes and badgers, and the impact of building on the land would be detrimental for these animals. It would also have a negative mental impact on us and the other neighbours, seeing all the green spaces disappear that we are desperately in need of. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak, and I would like to be kept informed of all future negotiations on this subject. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce. Okay, so we now go to another written statement. If the admin and governance manager could read the next statement. You might need to unmute.
This statement refers to the King site development, Cumberland Street, and its application number 19106AN. I object to these new plans for the historic site upon the following grounds: lack of affordable properties, obliteration of the War Memorial Cricket Pavilion, design of the dwellings. In no way do they complement the existing buildings. Hillcrest has demonstrated in other projects that it can readily build in pastiche styles, e.g. Riverside Place, Knutsford. This site requires sensitive treatment and not buildings which are alien and which could be seen in a location. The rear aspect on Core Street is redolent of the Victoria Park flats. Macclesfield deserves better. And that was from Mrs. Susan Witham.
Thank you. I have a written statement also on the same planning application 19/1068M. It says, I strongly oppose the demolition of the World War I Memorial Cricket Pavilion. It is not enough to transfer names to a plaque, etc. The building is the memorial and part of our local history. The War Memorials Trust has assessed this curtilage listed building as of a medium significance and important because of examples of utilitarian memorials like this are increasingly rare. The developer wrongly assessed it as minor. Last year, following criticism, the developer created an artist's illustration of a memorial garden for this site. However, this does not appear on the firm's revised master plan. When asked why not, the firm said it was still their intent to create the garden and the planning officer knew as such, i.e. they did not feel it necessary to restate as it was in the earlier plans. Are the people of Macclesfield, when invited to comment, expected to be psychic? For the record, this is what the King's School said ahead of 1999 refurbishment of the building. The association has embarked on its long cherished project, the restoration and modernisation of the old fiction library / cricket pavilion on the front field. Many may not know that the association built the pavilion in the 1930s as a lasting tribute and memorial to those old boys who sacrificed their lives in the First World War. Sadly, it has fallen into disrepair. The association is currently busy fundraising to cover the estimated 75,000 cost. although well over 30,000 has already been pledged, and it is hoped the work can begin again in the near future, possibly by Easter. Once the work is completed, the school will have a modern pavilion, which will also be used as a classroom, study and meeting room. It will also once again be a fitting memorial to the old fallen boys. Lastly, at this time of year, perhaps you would be so kind to read this. Jack Harrison was born in 1889 on 42 Cumberland Street, virtually opposite the grammar school gates. He was an all-round athletic star and became captain of the school's cricket team in his final year, one of the county's finest bowlers. In 1916, Jack enlisted in the 7th Cheshires. He was commissioned into the Machine Gun Corps and posted to the 31st Division. By February 1918, months after being slightly wounded, he was given leave to see his wife, who was pregnant with their second child. Within a few weeks, Jack was sent back. Less than a fortnight later, he was killed. Jack was 28 years old. In a cruel twist of fate, Jack's brother lost his life too in World War II. And that was from Rosie Green. We now have one speaker, James Meeken, also on the same planning application. So James, if you unmute, thank you. James, I cannot hear you. Can anybody else hear James? You're not on mute, but there's literally nothing. Let me just, right, I'm just, James, I don't know if you I've sent you a message in the chat if you want to reply, but we cannot hear anything at all. Can see you're talking. Oh, do you want to try going off and coming on again? If you leave the meeting and come back in? Can I suggest, Chair, if we can't get James back in, at this point, we allow the other public speakers to leave and have a short break while I try and ring James and help him come on. Would that be okay?
That sounds a good suggestion, yes.
Okay, so I'll just see if he can get on again. I'm just waiting for him to come back in. Okay, so he's back now.
Hello, hello, hello.
Yes, you're coming through.
Oh, well done. Thank you for your patience, everybody.
Hey.
Wonderful. My name's James Meacham. I live on Panel Street, and as said, I'm talking about the same planning application on the King's School site. A quick word about affordable housing, and then I'd like to talk about parking. As you will know, the application fails to meet Cheshire East standards for affordable housing, which is justified by the developer on viability grounds, as if the price of the land is fixed. Yet we can see from a notice concerned with the demolition of the bridge on Core Street, the footbridge, that the land is currently developer, but by Sir John Percival, and then therefore surely the value of the land, liability of building on it,
James, I think we've lost you again. Go on. Try again.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Try again. It's intermittent, but try again. We got up to Core Street footbridge.
All right. Okay. Yes. So the land is still owned by the King's School. So as regards viability is concerned, the cost of the land should be a product of what's left for a viable development, not the other way around, where the development has to be made viable against a fixed price for the land, surely. I'll move on to parking, if I may. There's a dearth of hard information about the parking. So there's still a large shortfall against Cheshire East minimum standards for parking provision. And that relates to the school block and the new 4-storey apartment block that Hillcrest says for the over 55s. The school block is to have 29 apartments, mostly 2-bedroom, which gives us Cheshire East minimum requirements as 52 parking spaces. Hillcrest proposed 29, leaving a shortfall of 23. Whether those 23 would all overflow into the surrounding existing streets depends on whether residents are able to use the nearby 15 visitor spaces on site. If they can use those, then that reduces the overflow from the school block from 23 down to 8. The new 4-storey apartment block, which Hillcrest referred to as later living for the over 55s, has recently been given 4 more spaces, and the apportionment within the building between 1- and 2-bedroom flats has been changed in favour of more 1-bedroom flats. That reduces the parking space requirement. So now there are 45 apartments, half of which are 2-bedroom. The overall effect is to reduce the shortfall from the previous 50 down to 39 parking spaces. However, there is nowhere for that shortfall to go other than to park on Pownell Street, Pearl Street, Core Street, and so on.
Sorry, James, that's the 3 minutes up.
Okay, right.
That's 3 minutes up, and I gave you quite a bit extra, so thank you, James.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to thank all the public speakers. We'd ask that you could all leave the meeting now, and you can follow the meeting live on YouTube, and we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, if we're moving on now to item 3, which are the minutes of the Planning Committee held on the 16th of October, to consider the draft minutes as a true record. Do we have someone propose that? Councillor Edwards propose.
Chairman.
And Councillor Roberts the second. All those in favour? Yes, so that's everybody who's there. Matters arising from those minutes.
I'm abstaining because I was on holiday and wasn't in the meeting.
Yes. Item 4, matters arising from those minutes. No matters arising from those minutes. So we now move on to the applications. And the first application is the application relating to Moss Lane, where we've had several speakers, and this is the building of 1- and 2-bedroom apartments on that site. So do we have anybody who would like to speak on this? Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. And can I start off by thanking all the public speakers who've joined us today to speak about their concerns about this application. You'll all be aware from looking at the portal that there are now over 108 objections on the portal, and there's a 268 signature petition also objecting to this development. We're also aware from contacting Cheshire East Council yesterday in an attempt to get the portal updated that there are quite a significant number of residents who've also commented on this application, and those comments haven't yet been put on the portal. We're advised there's a 10 working day delay, and we have actually asked Cheshire East Council to put that on the portal so it's clear for people who are waiting for their comments to go up. I think it's also important to note that when you met on the 16th of October to discuss this issue, because of the delay in putting those comments on the portal, the Planning Committee wasn't aware of the concerns and objections of residents, and so it's only right that we now reconsider our views on that application. And we've heard this morning the great wide area of concerns. As the ward councillor, one of the ward councillors for Macclesfield South on Macclesfield Town Council, I've gone through all of the objections and I've looked and I've prepared details of the number of objections in the areas of what I consider to be material planning considerations. First of all, in terms of pollution and traffic, parking, there were 76 residents made comments on this. And I think I want to just emphasise a few points about the traffic and parking. We heard from the public speakers about the South Macclesfield development area, otherwise known as the SMDA, which is part of the local plan strategy LPS 13, which already has outlined planning permission for 950 houses, retail, schools, playing areas, etc. And part of that plan was to provide a relief road from Congleton Road to London Road, and that is now not going to happen because we are advised that the bridge over the railway line was too expensive, and the relief road is going to be diverted down Turf Lane, which is not going to take a lot of traffic off the London Road area of Moss Lane. It's also important, I think, that when we comment on this, that we ask Cheshire East to consider widening the junction with the A536, that's Congleton Road. Familiar with the area, you'll know there's a grassy area there where a petrol station used to be. And my understanding is that there are still petrol tanks under there, but that needs to be sorted and that junction widened because there are going to be problems on Moss Lane already without this development. I think that the 41 residents commented that the design was out of keeping with the area. 20 residents commented about overdevelopment. And I think in summary, because this was made by the residents themselves, but it's too high density. There are no other 3-storey buildings in the locality. An application for the next door application, which is actually looks like houses, but is apartments, as one of the public speakers referred to. The 3-storey buildings on that development were actually refused, and the application went in for 2 stories. So, you know, it's not in keeping with the area to have 3 stories. In terms of drainage and the flood risk, a number of comments were made about that, and also in the public speaking. It's very marshy land, if you're familiar with it. It's very, very soggy. And one resident commented about how the neighbouring development has to be built up to enable them to get above the marshy land. It's not called Moss Lane for nothing. There was 36 comments about the loss of open space and wildlife, and we heard from the residents about that. Going back to the drainage flood risk, the area is lower down than surrounding properties, and we haven't yet seen the contaminated land report, although one has been requested. There was comments about lack of privacy, and we're all aware of the retained policy DC 38 from Macclesfield Borough Council. It's very clear about the measurements that for a 3-storey building there has to be at least 28 to 32 metres between properties and facing windows. And for 1 or 2 stories, the distance is 21 to 25 metres for actually facing windows. And we've heard from the residents, and looking at design, it's quite clear that there are going to be living room windows, and the nearby properties. And we've heard about water pressure. Concerns were expressed from residents on Craig Road and on Moss Lane on the portal about water pressure. And in fact, we'll see that United Utilities have actually commented about flood risk and water pressure, etc. I think that one point I would like to make is that a number of residents have advised me and about the fact that they were not aware of this development until after our planning meeting on the 16th of October. There appears to have been some randomness in terms of the delivery of the notices to residents. One particular road where there are 6 properties, 3 residents received the notices and 3 did not. So I do think we should question Cheshire East Council on their consultation process, because the timing's been quite inadequate. The planning notice only went up on the railings yesterday. So there has been a bit of a delay in actually advising residents about it, which I think has caused anger and concern amongst residents. Coming on to the documents that are on the portal from the authorities, this planning application is opposed by Cheshire East Council Strategic Housing due to the affordable housing provisions and insufficient detail. And the Cheshire East Landscaping Architect is opposing due to the out of keeping scale, design and landscape, and asked to further be considered from that. Interestingly, the application form from the developer has indicated they've not sought assistance or prior advice from Cheshire East Council, and quite frankly that shows. There's lots of documents missing that should be part of an application like this. And finally, the civic society oppose it. So my view is that we should oppose this application, but obviously I'll listen to what other councillors have got to say. And then, Chair, I'd like to move a proposal on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I fully support all the comments that Councillor Wilson has made. And I would also say thank you to all those members of the public who've taken the time to come onto our Zoom meeting and express their concerns so eloquently. And also thank you to Councillor Laura Judah. Yeah, there are so many things. Once we've seen the reports now from Cheshire East, it has very much clarified the situation and has given us a lot more information to work with. And as I said, I fully support the comments that Councillor Wilson's made. I would also add, looking at the different departments in Cheshire East, that the housing department has also objected because there is no clarity on the affordable housing and how it will be dealt with. To say that all the properties will be social housing, and that is what we saw at the last meeting, and that was one of the reasons why we were we were not supporting it as such, but we were certainly interested to see, we need to see more social housing. But when there is no detail, and that is where Cheshire East are saying we need the detail, we need to be assured about it. But there are other issues, as has been stated, the design, the fact that it's out of keeping with the street scene. There are really too many properties within the building, there are too many units. So I will wait to hear what other councillors say, but I would certainly would be supporting an objection to this. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Councillor Jackson. Does anybody else would like to speak on this? No, if we can go back then to Councillor Wilson with a proposal.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'd like to move that we object to this planning application. And I'll go through the grounds slowly so that the Admin and Governance Manager can note them down. So just bear with me. These are all material planning considerations. So the first one is the traffic issue. We've talked about traffic, a major issue on Moss Lane, pollution, and also parking, because so that's the first material planning objection. one of the residents clearly said that, I mean, 40 parking spaces is going to be completely insufficient for an apartment block that's going to accommodate potentially 76 people. The second objection is too high density and out of keeping with the design. It's overdevelopment and the design is out of keeping with properties in the area. And then the third one is drainage and flood risk. And then the next one is loss of open space and wildlife. And the next one is privacy and overlooking. And the next one is the adverse impact on nature conservation. Did I mention overlooking and loss of privacy?
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And then finally, I'm just checking, there was concerns raised about the water pressure. So I'm just having a little look down. I think that we should include objections on water pressure in the drainage and flood risk heading, please. Admin and governance manager, you can put that in the drainage, flood risk, water pressure. I'm just thinking about utilities issues, and United Utilities have raised these points, so I think we'll include that in the drainage flood risk area. So those are the material planning objections we should make. I would also like us to make a comment about the delay in notifying residents of this planning application, in that there was an insufficient time given to residents. And also, we should express our concern about the randomness of the consultation from Cheshire East Council, in that it's quite clear that some residents received a consultation letter and some did not. And that was actually on one street where half the people got a letter and half the people didn't. So I move those objections and comments to be submitted to Cheshire East Council.
Okay, so we need a thank you for that, Councillor Wilson, and need a seconder, Councillor Jackson.
Yes, can we also add a comment about the housing officer who has said that there is no clarity on how any affordable house, the whole block was supposed to be affordable housing, but there was no report, no clarity on how that would be achieved and what type of affordable housing it would be. And I think it's just, we need to just have that on record, that has been a statement from the Cheshire East Housing Officer, and that we obviously we support that statement.
Thank you.
I don't know if is the proposer happy with that?
Councillor
I am
Wilson.
happy, and I've just thought of another point I want to add.
Okay.
I want to also add, in terms of the questions to Cheshire East, that we seek clarity on the purpose of the land in the South Macclesfield development area, the SMDA, because one of our speakers advised us about the decision notice for application 17/1874M. Had indicated that this site was specially identified as an area of green infrastructure / landscaping that provides a public footpath cycle to the identified leak, that's play area. Whereas in the landscape comment from Cheshire East Council, the officer has said that the land is being provided. Let me just get the actual quote so that I'm clear on this. It has actually commented that the land is earmarked. The application site is identified as housing and employment land in the Cheshire East local plan strategy. Now, both of those could be right, but if the land has been earmarked for green infrastructure, then it can't be built on at all. So I think we should clarify that point as well, because a resident gave us some very detailed comments about that and has researched this thoroughly. So I want clarification on that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So should we take that proposal to the vote? All those in favour? And again, that's all. Thank you very much. There's no abstentions and nobody against. I would just like to thank the public speakers again. I thought that their impassioned and clarity of what they're saying, it was super, and it just shows how powerful that is. You know, we're a public body to serve the people, and it was really great to see. So well done to all of those.
Yeah, can I also thank the committee for reconsidering this? I know it was looked at the meeting on the 16th of October before we had sufficient information, but I'm very pleased that we were able to reconsider it and listen to the comments from the residents and members of the public. Finally, Chair, this application is on the portal, is listed as being considered at Northern Planning on the 2nd of December. I think that's unlikely because yesterday, the closing date for comments was extended to the 25th of November, which is only a few days before planning. But what I would like to do is I would like to request the committee's authority to speak on behalf of the committee when this application goes to Northern Planning. It's in my ward, as we've spoken about. I've listened to a lot of residents and done my best to communicate with residents who've contacted all 4 ward councillors. So I would like to represent this committee and make those objections known to Northern Planning when it actually meets. It may be the 2nd of December, but I think that's probably a bit too tight for it. But that's what I'd like to request permission to speak on behalf of this committee and make our objections known at the planning meeting that's going to make the decision on this.
That sounds a very good idea. Do we need to have that seconded? Councillor Jackson would second that.
Yes, a second, or I'll propose and someone else to second
Yeah,
it.
well, yeah, if Councillor Jackson proposes, do we have a seconder? Councillor Edwards. And those in favour? We're all in favour of that. That sounds a great idea. So we're now ready to move on to number 2, and this is application 19/3097M, which is the building of 134 dwellings on the space between Chelford Road and Worley Road. Do we have any speakers on this? Councillor Edwards.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Chair. I know this is going over the same old ground, and we've talked about this estate a number of times. And this is coming up under reserved matters. I'm a little bit disappointed on a number of points. We have talked in the past about the amount of trees that are going to be destroyed, taken out. We as a council are in favour of woodlands and the environment and so on, and they're going to take out something like 400 trees. I still don't see any accurate plan about the roundabout by Tesco's. There still doesn't seem to be any reference, although they've been taking samples, about the depth of the peat there, and it's enormous. I mean, did you see other people see the pictures of the depth of the peat there?
Yes.
And as part of the Cheshire East plan, as I understand it, they're not supposed to remove the peat at all. They can't sell it. It has to stay there. I don't know what on earth they're going to do with all this peat, but I'd like to have known about that. There was an allegation, and I don't know how true it is, that they had a planning permission for 135 houses. Well, this mentions 134 houses. And what the plan is that they will slightly move the houses down south, as it were, leaving a little tranche at the top with nothing on. And then they intend to put in another planning permission for more houses. And so this 134 houses falls within their perimeter of 135 houses, but then it gives them a little bit more land on which to build on. And lastly, if I may, About the air quality, I still am unhappy about this test tube that went missing at the roundabout. As I understand it, and I stand corrected by Councillor Roberts if he knows more than I do, that it's still under police investigation. It's not been satisfactory and so on. I understand that they are taking samples and photographs, counting the traffic and so on. At the moment, I think it is, they did it at half term yet again to give us biased readings and so on. I just find this whole application not to my liking, let's say. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you have any other speakers on this? Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm beginning to get deja vu with this application. It keeps returning to the Planning Committee for reserved matters to be considered. And Councillor Edwards has just gone over all of the objections that we made at our meeting back in May. It doesn't seem that any progress is being made in resolving the issues. And so I would like to move that we reconfirm the objections we have, which were submitted to Cheshire East on the 4th of May. And we discussed these at our planning committee on the 1st of May. In the interest of openness, Chair, I will go through them so that people watching can hear what we're talking about. I can't see the plans have changed, to be honest with you. So I think all these still do apply. We had 5 objections: the lack of pedestrian paths and cycleways in the development, increased congestion on already congested roads, the removal of mature woodland and hedgerows, risk to flooding in the area following the development, and the removal of peat from the site contrary to the National Planning Policy Framework and Cheshire East's local plan strategy. They're all comments that Councillor Edwards has just gone through as still being concerns. We did, in fact, this is why I'm getting deja vu about this. So our meeting on the 1st of May, we did reiterate our comments from our meeting on the 19th of July 2019, and those were comments about the site is within close proximity of the Broken Cross air quality management area, and the development will lead to increased traffic volumes and therefore further exacerbate the poor air quality of that AQMA, contrary to the Cheshire East air quality management strategy. And then there was very similar comments to May, so I won't repeat those, Chair, because in the interest of taking up too much time. But then we also commented on the high density of housing in the development, reducing the availability of open spaces and the site density, etc. We also talked about increased pressure on primary care facilities, increased pressure on the availability of primary school places, and lack of evidence there's capability in local secondary schools. There was quite a big debate about this when we last discussed it, but evidence has come to light since then that there are significant shortfall in places at secondary schools in the area. In fact, in Macclesfield, we've looked at planning applications to build temporary classrooms at local secondary schools to accommodate additional children. So I do think it's worth us repeating the objections we made both in July 19 and May 20. And I've just gone through those, Chair, for the interest of openness. But I believe our concerns still remain. I've seen nothing to change my view on that from the plans available. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else like to speak on it? Yeah, from my point of view, I've got the list in front of me, and it's exactly as you've said. I am worried about the lack of green space on that site as well, and the potential to occupy what little space there is on the periphery of the build with more houses. So if that's going to happen, then it really will be high density build. So do we have a proposal?
Chair, could I just add, I do support Councillor Wilson about the schooling. It is on my list to mention about that.
Yeah.
And it has come to light that the schools are chock-a-block in Macclesfield, the secondary schools. If they start building there, you can only put up so many temporary classrooms. We're going to need another school. It's as simple as that. Thank you. I support Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards. So should we have a proposal? Councillor Wilson?
Yes, Chair, I propose that we object on the grounds that I've outlined from our previous meeting on the 1st of May and our meeting prior to that. I did say the date, it was in July. Sorry, I've put the papers to one side, my apologies. 19th of July 2019, yeah. To assist the admin and governance manager at Really Care. None of the issues have changed, and I realise I went through it rather quickly. Apologies, Harriet. But I think if we go back to those objections and repeat them, I still think they're valid, Chair. So I so moved.
Second that.
And Councillor Edwards has seconded. All those in favour? And that's all. Thank you. Now moving on to the third application. This is the application 19/1068M, which is the development at the old King's School site. This is the one that was deferred on the 29th of January. And these are now revised plans coming in for the King's School site. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. And can I begin once again by thanking the members of the public who sent in written statements and also commented on this application. Once again, this is a very disappointing situation to be in. The Strategic Planning Board, which met in January 2020, which I represented this Town Council Planning Committee and spoke on our behalf about our objections, deferred the application for a number of reasons. And in the interest of openness, Chair, I'll just quickly go through those. The application was deferred for publication of viability appraisals, consideration given to costs of providing internal footpath cycleway balanced against affordable housing, submission of affordable housing scheme, clarification on air quality, consideration given to using the commuted sums towards indoor sport and recreation on upgrading the children's play equipment at West Park, review and design of the scheme with particular reference to type P, F, E and D house types on a later living block, further review on impact of proposal on setting of designated heritage assets. So, Chair, I think we've all seen from looking at the latest documents on the planning portal and hearing from the residents this morning that significant numbers of those items have not been addressed. The item I want to turn my attention to, which is something I did specifically speak about, is the removal of the War Memorial Pavilion. I think it's a disgrace that the developers are wanting to remove this War Memorial Pavilion. We heard from the statements read out this morning of the importance of this pavilion to the old boys of the school and to Macclesfield's heritage. Since the Strategic Planning Board discussed this, the War Memorials Trust have actually commented on the 9th of July. And they say, and I'll read this directly, Chair, the War Memorials Trust does not support the demolition of the Kirklees listed War Memorial Cricket Pavilion. This would result in the loss of an original War Memorial building and would destroy part of our shared heritage, resulting in substantial harm to the asset. The Trust recommends that an alternative scheme which retains the War Memorial Pavilion is investigated. The charity will be happy to assist with any further considerations if this would be helpful. Now, we know where the War Memorial Pavilion is. It's on the side of the green space. It could easily be retained as a feature of this development, part of the green space, part of which is being retained. So I think we should make further comment on that. I think we did comment back in December 2019 about the loss of natural light to existing properties, direct overlooking from habitable rooms, loss of privacy to existing properties in direct conflict with local plan policy SE1, and not meeting distance standards. And those objections still remain, I believe. And then finally, we haven't seen all the redesign plans. Some of them are there and some of them are not. So, I mean, they may yet be posted, bearing in mind there's some delay on this. But there's also an issue here again about affordable housing. There is a massively insignificant provision for affordable housing against the recommendations of the Cheshire East local plan. There's supposed to be 30% of housing, and there's only 5 affordable properties out of 115 on the site, which is a massive shortfall on the required amount of 30%. I'm sure colleagues will have seen the comments from the Macclesfield Civic Society about this. So again, I think we should make a comment on the lack of affordable housing. I'll listen to what other councillors have to say before I make a proposal, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Wilson. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I totally agree. You know, I think one of my main issues with this is the lack of affordable housing. It's central to the town. It's so, you know, local to all the shops and facilities, and so an ideal place for some affordable housing. And once again, we have a developer producing a viability report to ensure that they can maintain their 20% profit level near enough on the site. And there really should be, we should have make a difference here, because to just be so interested in that top line of the cost of it, it's a very prestigious site, and I think that those properties, many of them will be at a premium, and so they will probably make more on the site than they maybe would other sites, and so they can afford to have more affordable in this scheme. So I'm certainly you know, really object on those lines. And for the memorial, now that we've seen the support from the heritage group, and that it is important. I mean, the gates are important also, and so on the heritage aspect, I would certainly be objecting to the removal of the memorial. So I wait to see what else other councillors have to say on it.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Jackson. Councillor Roberts.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for your comments. This is a very, very sensitive site, as we all are well aware. It's very difficult to strike a balance of what is right and what is wrong. The sensitivity of the site means it has to be treated with the utmost respect, and I'm very concerned that the majority of deferral issues have still not been addressed. There's nothing on the website to suggest otherwise. However, I do believe that some of the issues related to the design and fabric and the situ of certain houses have been, I wouldn't say addressed, but have been alternatives have been offered by Hillcrest as per the website, the plans. And in a way, I do take it as a step forward that Hillcrest are concerned, and they're taking on board the local residents. I think they've been taken back by the amount of objections and the swell of opinion regarding the whole development. So in a way, I'm torn between not accepting the proposal, but sort of swaying towards helping Hillcrest and hoping they'll come round with even more, addressing even further issues. There are obviously problems with the affordable housing, the lack of it. There are massive issues with the parking, as we're aware. Cheshire standards have just not been met. However, I don't think they can be met on this site without reducing the capacity even further. So that's another problem that Hillcrest and the locals have to come together, the planning authority. The information and conversations I have had with concerned residents are that they are moving, they will move, and they will help as far as they can. Regarding the viability study, I don't know any developer that would do anything different, to be perfectly honest. My concerns are the parking, the lack of affordable housing. I think some of the design and fabric issues have been addressed in my view, to some satisfaction to some of the people concerned. It doesn't really affect me that much, but we do have problems, and we await the outcome of these deferrals even further. The air quality, you know, the footpath and the cycleways, and the affordable housing, etc., etc., as Councillor Wilson's superbly put out there. So I'm really torn between this proposal at the minute. So I will probably abstain for the time being until we get further clarification on the reasons, the deferral issues. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. Do you have any other comments on it? I would just say there is some evidence that the build developers have moved a little towards satisfying some of the concerns of some of the people, but to me, once again, the affordable homes issue they've got to move a lot further on that before it would ever get my support. And you know, the profits that they're making on, I think it's probably average is 16%. Is still an enormous sum of money, and I think there's a long way they can go to actually improve the affordability of those houses. Councillor Roberts.
I just can I just put this out that I do believe Hillcrest are a high-end developer. We've nothing like of the likes of this scheme in Macclesfield. It will be a first, and I do think they are trying to make it as iconic as they can, because of the site itself, where it is in the town historically, where it lies in the town historically and otherwise. And you know, if this was I'm pretty sure that if this was an alternative developer, you would probably get larger quantity of houses. You would get your affordable houses, but you know, you're probably talking 250, 300 houses rather than the 125 or whatever it is at the minute. So I don't know. I'd be concerned if another developer got hold of it. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Roberts. Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thanks very much to councillors who've spoken about this, and I do see that there has been some small changes put forward by the developer. I think one of the key issues for me is affordable housing, and as part of the deferral from strategic planning, they requested the submission of affordable housing scheme. And there are 5 properties identified for affordable housing out of 115, which is 4.35%, when it should be 30%. And there are also there are new plans. They've zoned the site now, and we've heard that in 2 of the zones, one of our public speakers covered this point, they have made some design changes which has slightly reduced the need for car parking spaces in the older living area and what's called the school block. But zones 1, 3 and 5, they're the areas where the properties were causing most concern with overlooking, and there was insufficient space between those properties and existing residential homes, in contravention of retained Macclesfield Borough Council Policy DC 38, which covers the issues we spoke about earlier in respect of the Moss Lane planning application. I do hear what Councillor Roberts has said, and I recognise that there has been some small moves towards changing the planning application. But I don't think we can get away from the fact that Strategic Planning Board back in January, they deferred this application and requested significant additional information, some of which isn't available, some of which is available but falls short. And we also have the issue of the pavilion. So on balance, I would like to move that we continue to object this planning application. The grounds we objected, the grounds we had in December 2019 were loss of natural light, direct overlooking from habitable rooms, loss of privacy, and not meeting the distance standards. And I think in the circumstances, I would like to add to that list affordable housing, and that the War Memorial Pavilion should be saved and not demolished. So I would like to move that we continue with our objections and we add to those parking, add to those affordable housing and pavilion removal. And I think probably parking is still going to be an issue. We haven't seen all the redesigns. Maybe we'll see those before it goes back to strategic planning. But at the moment, I still feel that insufficient new information has come forward to enable me personally to change my position on this application from object.
Well, thank you, Councillor Wilson. Do we have anybody who wants to speak on that proposal? Or do we have anybody who would like to second that proposal? Councillor Jackson, you'd like to second that proposal? So should we put that proposal to the committee? All those in favour of Councillor Wilson's proposal? We have 3. And anybody against? And abstentions? We have 2 abstentions. So that one is then carried. Can I propose at this point that we have just a short comfort break? Do people need that? So can I suggest that we just have 2 or 3 minutes just to refresh, and then we'll come back and continue with the meeting. Thank you.
When do you want to reconvene, Chair?
In 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, thank you very much, everybody. We can reconvene from this moment. Now everybody's back. So we've reached application number 4 on the agenda. This is number 20/4724M, which is a single-storey canopy, which is on Churchill Way. Do we have anybody who would like to speak on this? Councillor Jackson.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. This is on Central Ward. It's outside Craven House. For anyone who, I'm sure you all know the area, it's at the side of Craven House, down towards the area that contains the public toilets at one time. That has now become part of the development at Craven House and is now, I think, a sports gym area. And it's outside there. It's on that slope. There is an area, landscaped area there, and so this is going to be converted to contain a cafe. I have no objection to it. I was just a little concerned that there were no hours of opening on the application. They hadn't identified that. So I would say that I support it, but just subject to the hours of opening, the hours of trading. And I'm assuming that they will be appropriate and there won't be an issue with those.
Yeah.
So I have no objection.
Does anybody else like to speak on it? Councillor Edwards.
Can I assure Councillor Jackson that I'll keep an eye on that, the licensing and so on. Thank you.
And there is enough space. The one thing I couldn't see on the drawings was there's still enough space for everyone to walk past and end up beside the road without.
Oh, yes, it's actually where the where the existing wall is.
Yes.
I think that's the boundary. And they're just making some changes to the ground levels, etc., and putting some more landscaping in. But it won't affect the public footpath.
Okay, yeah, I thought that was the case. So do we have no objections to that one, or do we support it?
Well, no
objections. No objections. Okay, thank you. So if we move on to application 20/4423M, this is change of use. There's the used to be the Revolution Bar, and it wants to change from Class A to Class E to increase its potential use in the future. So do anyone want to speak on this? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, this again, town centre. I think we're going to see a lot of these coming forward now with the new changes in planning, to be able to have change of use to Class E, because this Class E really covers an awful lot then of uses in the town, and it just gives people a more flexible approach to be able to make a change without having to come back to planning if it's within the Class E use. So I don't have an issue with this at all, so no objection.
Anybody else like to speak on it? Councillor Roberts. If you just take yourself off mute.
Apologies, Chair. Thank you. Just agree with Councillor Jackson. I think by doing this, it obviously taking advantage of the new planning regulations, and I think it would also help the high street long term, because as she says, quite rightly states, that you're going to see a lot of this, and I think if they've got multiple uses, it can't do anything but help the high streets rather than see them closed down and abandoned and derelict. Thank you.
Yeah, excellent point. Councillor Edwards.
Yeah, it's a question really. This I see that it says no physical change, and I looked at excuse me, at the plans, Am I right in thinking that the whole sort of cinema is still untouched upstairs? It appears that the Revolution Bar is going to be remodeled and they're applying for a Class E. But is the cinema still there?
Good question.
No, the cinema was demolished. All the back, the cinema was upstairs and at the back, and that was all that was demolished, and the building was reconfigured as the bar for the bar and their use.
Right. Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't clear. On the plans, it still had showing the cinema.
Mm.
Thank you.
So shall we say we support this application? Councillor Wilson?
Yes, I support this application as other councillors have. And I just want to reiterate the point made by Councillor Roberts. In my capacity as the Town Centre and Regeneration Champion, both myself and Councillor Jackson sit on the Macclesfield Town Centre Recovery Working Group. And one of the things we have been looking at is vacant properties. And of course, when there's lots of empty properties in the town, it does make it look less appealing to get people back into Macclesfield. With the COVID situation, there's so many more people working from home. We've got a really good opportunity to encourage people to shop in Macclesfield, to shop local, to really emphasise that. And I think we're going to see more of these applications simply because of the change of property categories. This new Class E, as Councillor Jackson has said, is a very wide category, but it does give more scope for businesses to respond, particularly at this most difficult time for us all from a business point of view. The ability to be more nimble in terms like this will hopefully help and support our COVID response. So I'm conscious I'm repeating what other councillors have said, but I think it is important to emphasise the point about our town centre recovery, and this type of application, this type of clash use does help that. Thank you.
Right. So you propose that we support this application. Do we need to second that?
Chair, yeah.
We'll second that. Okay. And all those in favour? Yeah, all in favour. Thank you. Moving on to application 20/4486M. This is a 2-storey side extension in Arlington Drive. Anybody want to speak on this? No? So no objections. Moving on to application 20/4357M. And this is a 3-bedroom flat being converted into a 9-bed HMO on Catherine Street. Councillor Jackson. You need to take yourself off mute.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I do have some concerns about this one. We've got a 1-bedroom flat, a 3-bedroom flat, which is on the top floor of the property. And then in the basement and on the other floors, we've got 9 bedrooms for an HMO. I don't believe that there is really communal area for this number of bedrooms. The kitchen and living area is quite small. I was checking out there's a bin store in the yard. That's okay with that, but there's no cycle store, not in the yard, and so it identifies in the report that the cycles would be kept in the basement, and I couldn't really see any room in the basement apart from in the stairwell, which I thought was not a very safe place to have storage for bicycles. But there again, I think people with bicycles in that property would not want to be storing them outside in the yard because there's no secure storage. So that needs to be looked at. Also, the bedroom in the basement is right next door to the communal laundry. again, I don't think that's particularly helpful. And the basement has just one small window, so I just feel the bedroom in the basement will be dark. It'll be probably noisy from the laundry, and so I don't think that's it's not. I don't think that's good. I have seen though that there is no objection from the conservation area officer, or highways, or environmental health, so they don't object to it. But but the comment is made in the report that the developers or the landlord must be aware that they will have to apply for an HMO license before this property can be occupied. Yeah. So I'm expressing my concerns. I don't think, I'm not happy with it, with the very small rooms and lack of communal area and communal facilities. But I leave it to the other councillors, and I'd be interested in their comments on it.
They just say that the parking is below Cheshire East standards, but it kind of says that with the HMOs there tends to be a low demand for
well that's right, and it was previously, it was a public house. It's been empty for many years. So I don't think parking, I don't think is an issue that it could be objected to on planning grounds. I don't believe that would be an issue for that. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Wilson.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I support Councillor Jackson in her concerns about this development. I think she's articulated all the things I was concerned about, but there's a real clear case here of overdevelopment and intensification in this property. It's quite difficult to object per se to homes of multiple occupancy, although we have had a number of debates about that in our planning committee over the last month, and there is a consultation at the moment that we're all, I think we're going to consider at our next meeting. And certainly Central Ward is a ward where there's quite a large number of homes of multiple occupancy. But this particular one, there's 9 bedrooms in this property, and they're all very small. And I think Councillor Jackson makes a very strong point about the bedroom in the basement. I think the parking issue, Councillor Jackson's quite correct. It is frustrating parking around those streets, but often with homes of multiple occupancy, car parking isn't required. But I do think we should object on the overdevelopment intensification point that Councillor Jackson's made, particularly in respect of the layout in the basement. I think as part of that objection, we could ask for the design to be reviewed, because if the basement area were given over to more common areas, it would give more space for bedrooms. If you look at the design, if the basement area was more for common areas, it would give more space for bedrooms on the first and second floor. I get confused about floors when you've got a basement. The next 2 floors up. But yes, I would. If Councillor Jackson wishes to move her objection, I will be happy to second it.
Okay, Councillor Roberts.
Just one question, really, Chair. To form one 3-bedroom flat and a house in multiple occupation with 9 bedrooms, that suggests to me possibly that this could be farmed out to some council department or other private department with regards to special educational needs and stuff like that. The 3-bedroom flat, I'm really baffled as to why you'd have one 3-bedroom flat and then a house of HMO with 9 bedrooms. It just doesn't ring true to me. And just to confirm what Councillor Wilson, Councillor Jackson have said, the rooms are very small. it's not the biggest of buildings. The utilities and stuff like that will be pretty sparse. So I'm a bit baffled as to this 3-bedroom flat and 9 single bedrooms. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Edwards.
Yes, I note that the Macclesfield Civic Society is against this, and I always have deepest respect for their reports. I find that this, I support Councillor Jackson and Councillor Roberts and Councillor Wilson. I'm unhappy with this. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Jackson.
Yeah, so I'll formally move that we object on the grounds of over-intensification of the property.
And Councillor Wilson, second. All those in favour of that? That's all. Thank you. So we'll move on to application 204525.
Excuse me, Chair, do you mind if I just interrupt one moment? Sorry. Yeah. It's 11:45. The standing order sets meeting duration to 2 hours. Could we just check that you wanted to proceed beyond that 2-hour point, please?
We're all happy?
You want me to move something formally, Chair?
Yes, please.
Yes, I move that we suspend standing orders and continue to complete our agenda.
And seconded by Councillor Jackson. All those in favour? That's all. Thank you. So we move on to application 204525. This is the demolition of a conservatory to create a rear and side extension on Fernley Drive. Do you have any comments on this? No, so I'll put that down to no objections. Application 9. This is a 2-storey and single side storey extension on Grangelands. Do we have anybody commenting on that? No, so no objections on that. 10, application 204240M, which is a conversion of a 7-bed HMO into 4 apartments on Great King Street. Used to go in the opposite way of what normally happens. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, what a surprise! You know, there are so many applications now for HMOs, and then to see that this is a conversion away from a 7-bed HMO to create 4 apartments. So certainly welcome this. What I also like about it is the improvement to the front elevation of this property, where in the past there have been a couple of rather ugly looking windows installed, and these are now going to be removed and replaced with the traditional sash window. This is in Christchurch Conservation Area, and so you know, to be in keeping with the area, the new sash window, will be great. So I'm really pleased about that. It is also supported by the Conservation Officer. Yes, in fact, I would like to say that we support this application.
Yeah. Would anybody else like to speak on the application? Councillor Wilson.
Yes, I concur with Councillor Jackson's comments. I second her proposal to support the application, particularly noting the Conservation Officer's comments. The welcome development to see HMOs being converted to actual apartments, and very difficult to object to HMOs on planning issues, as we've all discussed in the past.
Yeah.
So yes, I second Councillor Jackson's proposal. Okay,
Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm really pleased, as Councillor Jackson alluded to, that this application seems to be going the other way from HMO into apartments. I think you'll probably see down the line in months and years more and more buildings going from HMOs to apartments. I don't know who the developer is on this, but they've obviously tried it and decided that it's would be easier to go down the apartment route. So I'll be supporting this application. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other speakers on it? No. So if we put that proposal, that's from Councillor Jackson. Was it seconded by Councillor Wilson? All those in favour? Yeah, we're all in favour. Thank you. Next application is 20/4571M, which is a rear extension and new porch and external works on Victoria Road. It is in a conservation area, but do we have any? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I was a little concerned with this. Having looked carefully at the proposed changes to this property, it's in a conservation area. It's in Prestbury Road Conservation Area. It's a really grand heritage building, and I was just a little concerned at some of the treatment of the external works, and particularly with the rear extension. I didn't feel that it was in keeping with the rest of the property, and I think it could have an impact on the conservation area. The other groundworks, and there's a movement, they have to widen the drive, they're moving one of the stone gate posts, altering some levels. Didn't have an issue with that. The porch was, I wasn't so sure about, and definitely the rear extension I felt had an impact on the conservation area. But I noted that the conservation officer has not commented yet, and so my view was on it that I was expressing concern, but the view would be dependent on conservation officer report, that the conservation officers know more about the technicalities of what's possible and what would impact on conservation area. So I would defer to them, but I'm just raising some concerns I have over it.
Yeah, so the deadline for comments is the 17th of November, so there still is time for those comments to come in.
Yeah.
Would anybody else like to speak on this? No. Councillor Wilson.
And I just speak to support Councillor Jackson's comments about the application and await the Conservation Officer's comments. So perhaps we could support subject to approval from the Conservation Officer, Chair, and then we're covering both bases then, because we haven't got another planning committee between now and the closing date for comments, so we can't defer it to the next meeting, but we could cover the concerns that we have by saying we support the application subject to Conservation Officer support, because as we know from experience, Conservation Officers often put conditions on approval, which may well cover some of the points that Councillor Jackson made. So I would suggest that that's what we do.
Okay, so that's a proposal. So from Councillor Jackson, seconded by Councillor Wilson. All those in favour? That's all. Thank you. So next application. Yeah, this is quite an interesting one. 20/3877M. This is the demolition of the former pumping station and the construction of 2 dwellings, and it's near Chelford Road. It's an application that's had, well, on the site they've had permission on several occasions, but this is just a new version. Anybody who would like to speak on this? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. I I know that this site has had a number of permissions on it for properties, for building. This one now is for two properties, each of 4 bedroom. They're only quite small properties with 4 bedrooms. Each bedroom is en suite. And we've been talking just earlier in the committee about HMOs, and I'm just wondering whether this is an example of a developer looking to have 2 properties as HMOs. There's no planning reason to refuse these, but I just do query how, as we've had other queries on other applications this morning, I do query what the eventual intention for these properties is. I note that there are 6 parking spaces in total for the 2 properties, 2 down at the bottom of the lane as people enter off the main road, then 2 adjacent to the properties and 2 in front of the properties. I don't feel personally that there is a planning reason to object, but we'll have to see, you know, what the eventual use for these properties is. A bit disappointing there's not very much in the way of landscaping, and the local the amenity space is not great, but I don't think that we can object to these, so I wait to see what other councillors feel about these.
Do you have any other comments from other councillors? No. Oh, Councillor Wilson.
Well, I agree with Councillor Jackson's assessment and on concerns, but that I can't see any material planning objections. So I think we simply have to move on to the next application.
Yeah. It does say that there's a possible contaminated land assessment, but so I mean we can't raise any objections. So no objections.
I can't see any material planning objections, and it's quite a common thing for a contaminated land report to be requested, Chair, on these types of developments. You do see it more frequently, just to see what's underneath the ground.
Yeah.
What's underneath the ground is far more scary than what's on top of it.
Yeah, true. Yeah, as we've learned. Yeah. Right, next application. 20/4631M, which is a rear extension and rendering on Butley Close. Anybody would like to speak on that? No, so no objections to that one. Next, application 20/4027M, which is an extension on Blakelow Road. It's part single and 2 rear extensions to form dining and kitchen rooms. Anybody like to speak on that? No, so with no objections to that. Next, application 20/4577M. This is the demolition of a conservatory and the building of a rear extension single story in New Hall Street. Anybody would like to speak on that? No, so no objections to that. 16, application 20/4640M, and this is a single front extension and 2-story rear and side extension on Barnside Way. Would anybody like to comment on that one? No. No objections. Next application 20/3584M, and this is for a 2-story side and single-story rear extension on Juniper Rise. Now, this is the one where there was an objection from a resident about being overlooked, and then there were revised plans put in, but I'm not quite clear whether those revised plans have satisfied that resident. Does anybody like to speak on that one? No? So we'll take it that there are no objections there then. Computer rise. Next, we have application 204651M. This is the conversion of the diving shop into offices and 4 apartments. This is on Park Lane. Do you have any want to speak to that, Councillor Jackson?
Yes, this property is down on Park Lane, very close to the underpass, which I'm sure people will know it. Having looked at it carefully, I have no objection. They've ensured that they have cycle storage and also a bin store, which I'm pleased about, because there, if you've got bins out on the footpath, you know, because there's not really anywhere to put bins. So they have got an internal bin store which fronts onto the footpath with a louvered doors. I'm looking at the treatment of the building and the proposals. I'm quite happy with it. So it's for 4 one-bedroom flats, in fact.
Yeah.
So I have no issue with it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So should we take it that there's no objections? Next application is 20/4693M, and this is the demolition of a prefab building and being replaced by 10 car parking spaces on Victoria Road on the old Parkside Hospital side. Anybody comments on this? No, so we have no objections to that. And then we have application 20/4733M, and this is consent to retain items built in contravention of planning approval. It's at the Picturedrome on Chestergate. Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chairman. This again is on Central Ward. In the past, it had been quite a contentious application when this came up for the Picturedrome. But I've noted that there are no comments on the website so far on this application here. So there's been certain works that have been carried out which don't comply with the planning permission, and they are one about the ventilation system, which is now external on the roof and should have been internal. There is also the external refrigerated units, which they have been altered. The boundary wall, part of the boundary wall should have been made up of some railings, and it's now a totally solid boundary wall. And the cycle parking was intended to have been in the courtyard, and now the applicant is suggesting that the cycle racks are at the front of the building. So there are issues with these, and I'm not an expert to be able to say whether they're okay or not. Environmental Health have not commented yet on the refrigerators or the ventilation system, because I just have issues with those on noise for the very close neighbours. So if Environmental Health Officer is okay with that, then all well and good. And the other issues are the cycle parking on the front of the building. Again, Conservation Officer has not commented yet. And again, I would say, well, you know, dependent on the Conservation Officer view on it for the cycle parking and for the railings, not having the metal railings. Because it was a feature, the metal railings on that side of the property were a feature. It's in the conservation area or adjacent to conservation area, and it's also, the Picturedrome is a heritage building. It's not listed, it's not locally listed, but it is a heritage building. So there are those issues, and if Environmental Health are happy with the changes that have been made and the you know, they don't feel there's any noise impact for the neighbours, and if Conservation Officer is okay with the impact on conservation area and a heritage building, then I will have no objection. But I just want to raise those points.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, there's still it's the 25th of November, the closing date for responses. So those I would expect would come in the intervening time.
Yeah.
So anybody else would like to speak on this one? No. Councillor Wilson.
Just a second, Councillor Jackson's proposal, Chair.
Okay, so if you move with that proposal that we await the comments from Environmental Health and Conservation Officer and defer to them. All those in favour of that? That's all. Thank you. And we have the final application is 20/4773M, which is a single-storey rear and side extension on Keswick Avenue. Do you have anybody commenting on that? So no objections to that. So if we're moving on now to item 6 on the agenda, which is the conservation area review, to consider the report. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. We have got a written report from the Admin and Governance Manager updating us that you'll recall we agreed we would go for an invitation to tender for the conservation review we've agreed to undertake, and the closing date for submissions is the 20th of November, so that's fairly soon. Yeah. So what we're being asked to do today is that 2 members of the Planning Committee are nominated for the opening of receiving tenders, and that a date is set for the opening of tenders. So I would like to move that we move those 2 points, first of all.
Okay. So do we have a seconder? Someone to second that? Do we need to do that? Yeah, Councillor Jackson. So in favour? That's everybody. Thank you. We move on to item 7.
Chair,
oh, you've
went the wrong way.
Oh.
I think, can you hear me now?
Yes, can I hear you now?
Yeah. Yeah. Now we've agreed those 2 points. We need to nominate 2 members of the Planning Committee to open the received tenders. I'm not quite sure how we're going to do that in the COVID world. Whether we would have to, perhaps we could ask the Admin and Governance Manager to indicate how she thinks we could do that, because I think that'll help us in deciding who's going to do it. And help us set a date. I'm willing to volunteer to support with this, but if there are more, I'm not, you know, I'm happy to help if needed. But perhaps Harry, you could let us know what your plans are.
My suggestion would be that all invitations to tenders are collated, sent out by email or post or both, but not to be opened until the agreed time, and that we convene over Zoom. Is that acceptable?
That's more than acceptable. It sounds very COVID secure to me. Yes, thank you, Harriet. That sounds very COVID secure. I'm willing to volunteer to assist with this, but I will stand back if there are more than 2 people. I'm just happy to help if required.
Councillor Jackson.
Well, I'd volunteer if required.
Well, so we have a proposal that Councillor Wilson and Councillor Jackson look after these reports, and so all those in favour? That's us all. So thank you very much, councillors.
Do we also need to set a date at this point or not?
Could I propose, Chair, that myself and Harriet and myself and Councillor Jackson and the admin and governance manager have a little email round, because I think setting the date in our diaries in an online meeting might just take up more time than it needs to. So I propose that now we've nominated now we know who's going to be doing it, that the 3 of us liaise over an appropriate date on or after the 20th of November.
Yeah, absolutely.
But if we'll try and do it in time for our next meeting, Chair, so that we will need to do it in time for our next meeting, I feel.
Yeah. Do we need to vote on that, or can we just take that as?
I think you can take that as confirmed, I think.
Confirmed, okay. Now we move on to item 7, which is the town character assessment and noting updates. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Committee members will be aware that we had a very useful briefing with Cheshire East Council Planning Officer about the next steps for our character assessment. Also included a very useful briefing on the SADPD, the site allocation and development policy review that's just taken place at Cheshire East. And I would like to propose, as a result of where we have now got to, having investigated, done our research, is that I would like to propose that we now set up a working group to continue to develop this issue. What we need to do now is we need to sit down as a working group and look at the issues that we identified we'd like to include in our character assessment, and draft some wording on those, and then we can do a read across to Cheshire East and local planning policy. So my proposal, Chair, is that we set up a working group to draft text on each point, to if you like flesh out the topics we've identified to help us develop this further. So basically my proposal is we set up a working group.
Yeah. Do we, Councillor Jackson?
I'll second that proposal.
Second that. So all those in favour of setting up that working group? Okay. That's all. Do we need to decide who's going to be on that at this moment in time, or?
Can I suggest, Chair, that we ask the admin and governance manager to draw up some terms of reference for us, that we proceed as we did with the recent very successful planning consultation working group, and that we invite all councillors to see if they're interested, because I mean we did invite all councillors, we didn't restrict membership to the planning committee, and then I think that we see those that come forward. If we're inundated with councillors, we may need to think about some sort of selection process, but I suspect it'll probably be just the planning committee members who are interested, but in the interest of openness, yes, I think we should invite all councillors, and then perhaps the admin and governance manager can deal with that and collate the responses, and I suggest liaise with yourself as chair of the planning committee, and that I suspect that will come to a conclusion that we have a small number of people to do it. If we have rather more, we may need to think about how we handle that. But perhaps, Chair, you would liaise with the admin and governance manager in the first instance. And if we are overwhelmed, we can consider how we deal with that. Okay. So is that a proposal that needs to be seconded, that we pass it to everybody? So seconded. All those in favour of invited everybody? Yeah, that's great. So if we move on now to the Fence Avenue site, the public open space and the canal bridge, and to consider that report. Councillor Wilson.
And thank you, Chair. And thank you to the Admin and Governance Manager for producing a report on this issue. Committee members will recall that this started off as a members item from myself, that we should, following the Fence Avenue development that we discussed recently, that I attended the Strategic Planning Board to speak about on behalf of the council. We expressed some interest in reopening the canal bridge that would lead to greater connectivity for the Fence Avenue development to Herdsfield and also to the Buxton Road area. And also we talked about the public open space. We were very keen to use the public open space, part of our Forest for the Future project. So the Admin and Governance Manager has drafted letters. They've been sent to the appropriate groups and individuals. That's Cheshire East Council, the Canal and River Trust, and also the developer, which is Barrett and David Wilson Homes. They've all indicated that they will agree to come to a meeting. And so the recommendation in the report before us today, Chair, is that meetings are set up with the relevant parties to progress plans for the public open space and the opening of Canal Bridge 36. So I move that we set up those meetings to proceed with this matter.
Okay, and do we have somebody to second that? Councillor Edwards, second that, and all those in favour? We're all in favour.
In terms of who attends the meetings, Chair, can I suggest that we proceed in liaison with yourself about that? Because obviously, as it was my particular project, I'd be very keen to attend. There may be other councillors who are keen to attend, and certainly I think the Admin and Governance Manager and or the Town Clerk would want to attend. So I think, again, it's very difficult to do diaries at dawn in an online meeting. So could I perhaps suggest, Chair, that any planning committee members who are interested in attending what will likely be a Zoom meeting, I'm certain, indicate now, and then, Chair, we could perhaps leave it with yourself and myself to liaise with the Admin and Governance Manager to proceed with that.
Yeah, because is there people who are now on the planning committee who would like to get involved in that? Councillor Jackson, like to be involved. Councillor Jackson, Councillor Wilson, and myself. Okay. Right, moving on. Now we have the third of the planning consultation meetings, and managed to squeeze in the third on the deadline day, and through Harry's hard work, we've got the everything typed up and sent off on time, and the minutes of those consultations are with you now. So our job now is to approve those minutes. So do we have somebody to propose that? Councillor Jackson.
Thank you. I'll propose.
Can I second it, or second it by Councillor Wilson? Yeah.
No, you second it, Mike. That's
yeah, I'll second it. I'm not sure as chair. We should let everybody else do all of the proposing and seconding.
Yeah, let us do all the work.
Yeah, you do all the work. We'll do the work. Yeah, I'll do my best. So all those in favour? That's all So those are passed as a true record. We have no correspondence and no member items. So the time and date of our next meeting is on the, well, it's 10 a.m. on the 27th of November from wherever you have your laptop. So I declare this is the end of the meeting. Meeting now closed. Thank you very much.